You can buy $1 million worth of property with only 50K. Sounds far too good to be true, but I'm going to be breaking down for you how you can buy $1 million worth of assets with $50,000 here in Australia. Now, there's going to be a lot of caveats and a lot of unique things you may need to consider in this situation, and this applies for couples. So if you're an individual, it's probably easy to buy 500K with 25 grand, but this is more for couples who are wanting to get $1 million worth of assets in a short period of time, and this is particularly if you're buying your first property. And if you stay around to the end of today's video, I'm going to explain how you can create $2,000 of income from this $1 million worth of asset base. You may not use this strategy completely, but hopefully it gets you thinking about what some of the state and federal governments do and how you can maximize your benefits based on your situation. So let's start with the first property and breaking into the market. So this situation is where you've got a couple and they both are willing to buy a property and you're going to need $25,000 each. The first thing you're going to need to do is have a chat with your broker and make sure you can apply for the home guarantee scheme where you can put down a 5% deposit. What this means is you're not going to have to pay lenders' mortgage insurance, which will save you thousands of dollars and give you access to a lot more leverage. So with 25K down on a $500,000 property, you can put 5% down and hold a $500,000 asset. But wait, there is more. And in Queensland, we have a couple of concessions if you're a first home buyer. The first one I want you to just throw out the window is the first home builders grant. Don't even think about it. Don't go buy a new build. I mean, unless that's your strategy or that's what you want for your own home. But if you're looking to create wealth, in my opinion, I think you should be looking at the established market. So forget about the 15 or 20K or 25K first home builders grants. What we're going to be focusing on is the stamp duty concession. So you've had a chat with your broker or with your bank, and you've been accepted into the first home guarantee scheme where you can put your 5% down for your very first property purchase. The next thing you need to do is look at the purchase price. So in particular, you want to buy a home at or around that 500K mark. And the reason is because of the stamp duty concessions. We're not worried about the builder's grant, but the stamp duty concession is where you buy a home at or below $500,000. You get the full stamp duty concession here in Queensland, which means you save around $10,000 to $14,000 on stamp duty. So you've avoided LMI, which might have set you back about 10 to 15K. You've avoided stamp duty, which might have set you back around 10 to 15K. So you're already up about $20,000 to $30,000 in terms of value. Now you're putting $25,000 down and you've got John and Sarah, who are a couple. John's going to put 25K down onto his first home, and Sarah's going to put 25K down for her first home. This all comes down to whose name is on the title. You can actually service together. Again, chat with your broker about this, but John and Sarah can actually service the properties together jointly, but they can be individually on the titles, which means they can get the first home grants. Again, chat with the broker, chat with your bank about this situation to make sure you're following the rules. But at the end of the day, if John's buying his first home and Sarah's buying her first home, then you're more than okay to use this strategy. And so John's going to put 25 grand down to buy his $500,000 property, not pay LMI, not pay stamp duty, and control that $500,000 asset. He's going to live in that property for 12 months, and Sarah's going to do the exact same thing. She's going to buy her first home, maybe have a couple of roommates, which you're allowed to do. You're allowed to have flatmates. You know, you don't have to pay the mortgage yourself in your own home if you're willing to have your cousin or your sister or one of your mates live with you for a little while and pay a bit of the rent as well. And so Sarah might move into her own home for 12 months for 25K down and avoid the stamp duty and avoid the lender's mortgage insurance. So as a couple, John and Sarah can therefore, after 12 months, potentially hold $1 million worth of investment property because they might move out and go rent in an apartment in Brisbane for $500 per week and rent out house number 1 for $500 per week and rent out house number 2 for $500 per week and end up with $1 million worth of property renting for $1,000 per week while they go and live in an apartment for $500 per week themselves. So that's a great way for you to start building your wealth journey with a greater strategy. So at the start of this video, I mentioned that I was going to explain how you can go from that scenario and create $2,000 worth of income from these first two purchases. Now, the trick is to get large enough parcels of land that you can add a granny flat. So generally, you want to be buying land over 600 square meters, but ideally 700, 800, or 1,000 square meters. And in that scenario where you've got a good sized backyard with drivable side access, if John buys his block for 500K with drivable side access on 700 square meters, and Sarah does the same thing, maybe she gets an 800 square meter block for 500K, getting the stamp duty concession, they're getting their LMI waiver, and this is the kicker, they're able to add an auxiliary dwelling at a later date. So they've both moved out of their first homes and now they've got them as investment properties. Now, if they've got those 700, 800, 900 square meter blocks, they can then add an auxiliary dwelling. So for around $200,000, they can add a new dwelling on each of the properties. So they spend another $400,000, but the rental return they might get is between $400 to $500 per week. What this means is if your rents go up on the front houses to $550 per week and the rents on the granny flats rent for say $450 per week, this means you could be generating $1,000 per property with the house and the granny flat to essentially create passive income. And that's $2,000 per week, so $1,000 with one setup and $1,000 with the other, all from starting with $50,000 as your cost base. This all sounds too good to be true, but it is realistic and it is achievable if you're willing to go through a bit of sacrifice. You know, there is some sacrifice in there. You need to save your $25K deposit. There is some sacrifice that you'll need to buy in a $500,000 location, which could be lower socioeconomic. There is a sacrifice that you need to move out for 12 months to live in the property and make it your own home legitimately for that 12-month period. So it is a bit of sacrifice up front, but after doing the hard work, you could generate up to say $2,000 of income, of rental income, building your portfolio and giving you passive income off the back of it. This is exactly what I would have done if I could go back and start again. Emily and I didn't get the stamp duty concession. We used the First Home Super Saver scheme to save a bit of our deposit faster, and we were able to save $66,000 as a couple. But in hindsight, if I had $66,000 and I was starting again, I would actually go ahead with this strategy. Then I could look to build on that asset base, maybe do a bit of a renovation while I lived in the property for 12 months and continue to save some money. And then maybe after we've got these two assets, so John and Sarah or Luke and Emily in this example, I could go and buy a more blue chip asset because the first two assets I've bought were more cash flow focused. It's about finding the balance in your portfolio. You need both the growth and the cash flow. And buying these starter assets is more about cash flow because you're buying those lower socioeconomic areas. But if you can add value to them by doing some minor renovations, and if you can add value by adding auxiliary dwellings, that's where they can be really sweet in your portfolio in terms of creating equity and creating cash flow. Then I go and look and buy $1 million home in a blue chip area on the bay side, looking more focused on capital growth. This is exactly how I would do it all again with $50K to acquire $1 million asset base and potentially create $2,000 of rental income off of two properties. So leave a comment down below if you've ever thought about doing something like this, pulling all the levers you possibly could to fast track your wealth creation journey. Using the first home guarantee scheme, not having to pay stamp duty because you buy at a certain price point, looking for a property with cosmetic renovation potential, looking for a property with value add potential to add an auxiliary dwelling, otherwise known as a granny flat. If you're able to pull all of these levers on one deal and do it 2 times over because you're a couple, that's where I can see people really fast tracking their wealth creation journey and building their property portfolio to give them choices, to choose what you do with your time, to choose who you spend your time with, and to not leave you so stressed out, stuck with your day job. If you want to see a property purchase around the 500K mark, which would be great for something like this strategy, then click this video over here. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you in the next one.